Right, we're going to get going so we can start on time or as close to on time as possible. Welcome everyone to the 9th Annual Social Justice Lecture of the University of San Francisco Swig Program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. Where tonight our program is titled Intersectional Jewish Social Justice, Dismantling Racism and Antisemitism as an Unapologetic Black Jewish Womanist Leader. My name is Aaron Hahn Tapper. It's my honor and privilege to work with this cutting-edge program. Let me begin by thanking a number of people for their support for making this event possible. Thank you to all the Swig JSSJ faculty and staff. Thank you to the Department of Theology and Religious Studies for co-sponsoring this event. I'd like to take a brief moment to tell you about our Swig JSSJ program. Founded in 1977, our program is the first Jewish Studies chair or program at a Catholic university anywhere in the world. In 2008, we were reestablished as a Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, the first academic program worldwide to formally link Jewish Studies with social justice. Including a minor in this field, in the classroom, our program offers a wide range of significant Jewish Studies courses not found in other educational settings, such as the following courses all being offered this fall on campus. Students, pay attention. Black Jewish Relations, co-taught by Professors Reggie Daniels and Shana Hammerman, who identify as Black and Jewish respectively, arguably the only Black Jewish Relations course in the country co-taught by such fine individuals. The Jewish American Experience through graphic novels, taught by Noa Kushner, who earned a PhD in comparative literature from UC Berkeley. Social Justice in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, taught by our award-winning faculty member, Oren Kroll-Zeldin, who's also the assistant director of our program. And Holocaust and Genocide, being taught by our newest faculty member, Alexis Eyre, who earned her PhD from one of the only places in the world one can get a graduate degree in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, Clark University. Our JSSJ program also offers an annual intensive Hebrew language summer program called Hebrew San Francisco, and this summer is our 22nd consecutive summer. Beyond the classroom, we offer extraordinary events that are free and open to the public, including a number of annual events. Our two final events this semester are as follows. On Monday, April 8th, from 5:30 to 7 in Fromm Hall, we will have our third and final program in our inaugural Israel-Palestine Studies speaker series called Gaza, Past, Present, and Future. This panel discussion will feature three activists from Gaza, Lara Abdur-Ramadan, Ahmed Al-Khatib, and Jihad Seftawi, who will together discuss the contemporary situation in Gaza while sharing creative strategies to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in this coastal enclave. And on April 9th from 6:30 to 8, also in Fromm Hall, we'll have our 10th annual Social Justice Passover Seder, in this case a pre-Passover Seder. This year's Seder will be led by our new Swig JSSJ Rabbi in Residence, Camille Angel, who along with student chair Lena Heller, and local rabbis Amy Eilberg, Carla Fendes, Lori Hahn Tapper, Noa Kushner, and Jessica Zimmerman-Graf have designed a powerful program titled Gender Justice in the Me Too Era. If you'd like to learn more about our work, there are green booklets found at the entrance to this room, which you are free to take on your way out. You can also sign up to be on our listserv. And there's a sheet over there for that. Through the Swig JSSJ program, we believe that education is the best long-term way to create systemic change. Whether one has the time to take a semester-long course or a mere few hours to hear from a single speaker, education is fundamental to making our world better, paramount in shining the spotlight on the margins, on oppressed communities who are mistreated merely because of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or another social identity altogether. Now, let me introduce tonight's event formally. As you know, our program tonight is called Intersectional Jewish Social Justice. Having just read Rebecca Traister's recent book, Good and Mad, The Revolutionary Power of Women's Anger, which was suggested to me by a woman, fresh in my mind is the notion that anger can, and often is, a healthy emotion in fueling the fire of social justice activism. This book was helpful to me as I myself am an angry activist. Seeing social injustice makes me mad. Mad enough to feel a need to join those working to engage the very systems of oppression we ourselves perpetuate. This book, Good and Mad, also reminded me of the double standard we in the United States have regarding women's anger when compared to men's anger, dismissing the former as rooted in irrational emotion while praising the latter for no other reason than because it emerges from males. Similarly, it reminded me of the triple standard we have in the US regarding black women's anger. As a white, albeit Jewish male, I must be mindful of this, especially at those times when, due to my male privilege and white privilege, I forget that I was born on third base but did not hit a triple. Our guest speaker tonight will take us down the path of intersectional Jewish social justice, helping us better understand ways to dismantle racism and anti-Semitism from the perspective of an unapologetic black Jewish womanist leader. Tonight, Yavilah McCoy will deliver our 9th annual social justice lecture. Our previous social justice lectures have been delivered by Peter Geffen, Ronit Avni, Rabbi Amy Alberg, Rabbi Anat Hoffman, Rabbi Andrew Sachs, Dr. Chen Alon, Stash Kotler, and Rabbi Jill Jacobs, who was in conversation with Rabbi Michael Lizak and activist Dolores Canales. Immediately following Yavilah's remarks, she will be in conversation with social justice leader and founding rabbi of the Kitchen, Rabbi Noa Kushner, after which time we'll have a brief question and answer session with all of you. Before I introduce Yavilah, let me tell you a little bit about Rabbi Noa Kushner, another powerhouse with us this evening. Noah founded the Kitchen in 2011 in response to friends who were looking for an informal, transformative Shabbat experience that they couldn't find. The Kitchen quickly grew from a local Shabbat experiment into an active doorway for San Francisco's Gen X and millennials looking for serious Jewish life. Through an emphasis on firsthand experience and doing Jewish over pedigree, the Kitchen has changed the ways religion is perceived and integrated into daily life. A former Hillel rabbi for both Sarah Lawrence College and Stanford University, Noah has led the Kitchen to international renown, having had their community featured in Haaretz, Tablet Magazine, The Forward, and Medium. We look forward to hearing Rabbi Kushner and Yavilah in conversation in a few moments after Yavilah's remarks. Yavilah is one of the most important voices in the Jewish American community today. Raised in an Orthodox family, during her formative years, Yavilah grew up in Brooklyn, where she studied at places such as Yeshiva University High School. Between 2000 and 2008, Yavilah directed IECA, a nonprofit organization providing educational resources regarding Jewish diversity, while also working to increase awareness of Jewish diversity and expand inclusion for Jews of color. As an anti-racism activist, she has provided training and consulting to numerous social justice agencies both within and outside of the Jewish community. In 2008, she became director of the New England Curriculum Initiative, a nonprofit educational consultancy that services 600 prep schools across the nation with religious diversity resources. In 2009, she co-wrote and performed The Colors of Water, a Jewish gospel musical describing the matriarchal journey of 4 generations of her African-American Jewish family. In 2014, she established Dimensions Educational Consulting, through which she serves as CEO, working to support organizations in expanding their relationships across race, religion, identity, and culture. More recently, she joined the steering committee for the Women's March, a women-led movement providing intersectional education on a diverse range of issues. A renowned speaker, educator, consultant, and spiritual practitioner, I personally followed Yavilah's career going on 2 decades. She is a giant, or as the former Ashkenazi yeshiva student in me would say, a gadol. She's a social justice warrior, celebrating female fortitude, a partner of mine and many others in working to disrupt patriarchal advantage and white supremacy. I'll end in quoting political consultant Angela Peoples. Following the widespread thanks voiced toward black women after their unsurpassed involvement during the 2017 special election for Senator of Alabama, Peoples wrote in the New York Times, that although such praise for black women was a small step in the right direction, we don't need thanks, she said. We need you to get out of the way and follow our lead. On that note, please join me in welcoming Yavilah McCoy to the campus of the University of San Francisco.
With the fierce urgency of now, in this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. There is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. Now, many people think of Dr. King as a leader who actually welcomed folks from a place of warmth, from a place of nonviolence, from a place of actually inviting people to dig into their deepest humanity and find community. But Dr. King was also a warrior. Dr. King was a warrior because in the times that he lived, he had to push against apathy. He had to push against complacency. Because when you're making people feel good, they also think they have the right to tell you when to slow down. They think they have the right to tell you when it's not the right time. When it's not this issue, but another. And in those times, Dr. King stood. And he said, no, this is exactly the right time for voter registration. This is exactly the right time to fight poverty. This is exactly the right time to stand up against the aggressions and the wars of Vietnam. So in this day and age, I look to that prophet and I say, time's up. I stand before you as an unapologetic Black Jewish womanist leader because the time is now. The time is now for us to be able to look out into the world and understand ourselves as proximate to the need to end what is happening to ourselves. So I
want to hear every word, and the mic is not yours.
Oh. Well, let's start to fix that right now. Okay. Does that work? No. No. Aaron, you might have to come up here and turn your mic on. Oh. Hello? Hello? You do that thing.
Hello, hello, hello.
All right.
Hello? Now, you know I don't need this mic. All you had to do was just tell me you couldn't hear me, because I don't really need this mic, but I'm going to use it to make sure that you hear me. So, I'm the CEO of an organization called Dimensions Educational Consulting. And at Dimensions, the work that we're doing in the world is to help people to recover their deepest sense of their humanity in relationship. We work with people across the spectrum of religion and education and corporations, but every person and every organization that I encounter, I meet human beings that are in need of being able to recover their deepest sense of humanity in relationship. I want you to think for a second before I start my talk tonight. Where do you feel your deepest sense of humanity in relationship? Does being around people who are just like us always call into the deepest sense of our humanity in relationship? Or is it when you've had to push against a comfort zone, live into a discomfort, being with people who you did not know immediately that you would feel a connection to, that what rises out of that experience is a deeper sense of your humanity? Now, as an intersectional person, as a person who carries multiple identities that I bring together at the crossroads of justice, I often have the opportunity to bring people into proximity with a deeper sense of their humanity. Now, within Dimensions, we do this by elevating and expanding the transformational power of Jewish women of color. So some of the people that I'm immediately proximate to are people who are just like me. Those leaders are of diverse racial, cultural, spiritual, sexual, and class identities. And these women work together and allow their lived experience to intersect so that they can be resilient and resourceful in championing justice, not just within their own lives, but within all the social justice spaces that they navigate. Through Dimensions, we're figuring out how to work together, how to partner with others to support diverse movements for change that are rooted in activism, but that also address the intersectionality of women's experiences across heightened prospects that we as Jews of color have for erasure, for tokenization, for racism, for anti-Semitism, all things that have emerged in recent movement work. Through my work in Dimensions, women of color are leading to develop one-of-a-kind programming that will allow us to lead in the world as empowered Jewish women. Now, I said I was going to come here to talk to you about social justice. But what I'm here to tell you is that social justice doesn't always mean the same thing to all people. We want our social justice to be rooted in activism that is emergent, that can live across intersectionality. We want our social justice to be contemporary and relevant to both Jews and non-Jews, to both POC, Jewish, and non-POC Jewish spaces. We are looking at things like wellness, spirituality, the capacity to engage in loving and restorative activism, the ability to be integrated in our movement building, to be able to be multiracial, multi-ethnic, cross-class, multi-gender, differently observant, and intergenerational in our identification as Jews and as women. Through Dimensions, we are looking to experience connections that are often disparate in the communities we cherish. And so before I start talking to you a little bit about racism and anti-Semitism, I want you to understand that the way I live into the words of the prophet Dr. King is to make sure that in the work I do in the world, I'm living into the values that I believe in. There's no such thing as, oh, I just go to my 9 to 5. That's not the way I live as a leader. In my 9 to 5, I live into the intersectionality that will allow me to address the deepest and broadest sense of my commitment to justice. And I do that in community with those who I know have been targeted by erasure, by tokenization, by all of the isms that live in the world. I do it with them. I don't do it with people with privilege. I do it with people who are standing at the crossroads. So that begins the journey of why I'm here to speak to you tonight. I'm here to speak to you tonight because we say a lot of big words. Anti-Semitism, right? Racism, intersectionality. Tonight I'm going to lead you through a journey where I get proximate to those words, and I show you how where even in those words, where we might have a definition, there's a need to go to the place of how proximate am I to the humanity that lives beneath those words. So let's go to anti-Semitism. Now, anti-Semitism, for me as a young girl who grew up in Brooklyn, went to yeshiva, I went to Jewish parochial schools, they called them Beis Yaakov, which is what Orthodox young girls, Orthodox young girls get educated through the parochial Jewish education system. And in those schools, I was taught from the time I think I was 3. Every week we would come into the class, and my teacher, her name was Laura Vivier, would teach us about the weekly Torah portion. So from the time I was very young, I became proximate to the idea that Judaism has an old history, that Judaism has a story. that my Judaism didn't just start today, but that I could connect my Judaism across thousands of years. But there was an issue with the way I was taught Judaism. You see, the first thing I say about anti-Semitism is that the word Semite connects us to a story that isn't often told, which is that Semitic originally referred to a family of Afro-Asiatic languages that included Akkadian, Arabic, Aramaic, Ethiopic, Hebrew, and Phoenician, yes? But the reason why it connected to all of those different languages, and why you can look in Webster's and you'll find that definition for Semitic, is because that is where our people grew up. How many times have people read that, or heard that, or heard people speak about, well, I can't be anti-Semitic because I am a part of the Semitic tribes, yes? Without going back to a very important piece of our history, which is that we, the Jewish people, grew up in the regions of Middle East and Africa, which means that in the context of white supremacy, we grew up in regions of the world where people are today and have historically been called uncivilized, savage, other than Christian, yes, less than. That is the beginning and the origins of the Jewish people. Now I bring that up before we start talking about anti-Semitism, because my daddy, when he would start to teach me Torah, would tell me to claim the fullness of what it means to be connected to the stories of the Bible and the stories of Torah that developed from there. He would study with me the laws of the Talmud and the Gemara, and he would always highlight for me that my ethnicity as a Black Jewish woman was not other than Jewish, but essentially Jewish. This home upbringing that he was giving me held in contrast for me the fact that post 1000, in most modern Jewish history books, the history of Judaism had become to be erased. Prior to year 1000, Jews lived in Mesopotamia. The Torah academies were in places called Iraq, which was Babel. The derivation of 2,000 years of our oral history came up in the Middle East and in North Africa. So what I really wanted to know, which he taught me in regard to anti-Semitism, was, has anti-Semitism robbed us? Has something about anti-Semitism also made it seem that after year 1000, in most modern Jewish history books that you may see, Judaism begins to evolve in Poland. You hear the stories of Mainz, Germany, of Bertha Meir Hagola of France after 1000. You hear about Rabbi Rupam Lubavitz all the way down to 1930 with the Mashkiach from Mir Yeshiva. Now, I was an Orthodox woman, so it was very important for us to know what they called Masorah. Where do we come from, yes? But after year 1000, in most Jewish history books, and in the timeline I just looked up on the internet, not even 2 weeks ago when I was teaching the Jews of Color Torah Academy, from the year 1000, we go into Mainz, Germany. We go into France. We go into Poland. We go into Russia. And that is supposed to be the derivation of the Gaonic period that was in Pampatisa, Babylon era. From Iraq, we jump to Poland until 1930. Now, my father taught me that something happened to us in 1000. In 1000, the violence of Christian hegemony and white supremacy forced us to part from each other as Jews. We created hierarchies of value that erased Rav Sadia ben Yosef Gaon, who was the leading luminary of Iraq and Surah. He was the first important rabbinic figure to write extensive Torah responsa in Arabic. He was the founder of Judeo-Arabic. We have erased Rabbi Yitzhak Al-Fasi, the Rif, 1013 to 1103. The Algerian Talmudist, Algeria, who lived in the central Maghreb, but was the first to compile the current Talmudic law and present all the practical conclusions of the Gemara in a clear and definitive manner. The first in Algeria.
We've erased people like the Ramban of Girona, Catalonia. Yes? He was a leading medieval Jewish scholar. You may know who Maimonides is, but do you know who Nachmanides is? Do you know that he was a Sephardic rabbi, a philosopher, a physician, a Kabbalist, who was responsible for the restoration of the Jewish community of Jerusalem after the Crusades of 1066? We're missing the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, the El Rab de España, the Meiri, the Ritva. I could keep going all the way down to 1936 in Iraq and in Iran, in the Middle East, in the Maghreb, and in Africa. And yet we do not know these things. They are not celebrated and lifted up in our Jewish history books regularly. Why is that true? Because anti-Semitism didn't just tell us we didn't have the right to survive. It told us that in order to survive, we had to embrace a white supremacy that created hierarchies of value between the East and the West. Hierarchies of value that taught us that because the Crusades now were so embarrassed of the mathematics, of the architecture, of the intellectual philosophy and poetry that hit Europe and embarrassed the European continent into a dark age, that we have to go back now and kill the savages. We have to go back now and get rid of those among us who were the dark Moors. We had to create a hierarchy of value with the establishment of the Catholic Church under Constantine and with the New Testament that said the Jews are responsible for killing God. Why? Because under the golden era of Spain, they thrived. Because our intelligence and our religion and our understanding of our people matched Islam, was in the halls of Islam, was welcomed in Islam. To this day, if you travel to Spain, most ancient Jewish synagogues have both an ark for the Quran and an ark for the Torah that live side by side for most places of worship. How do we hold this with our interaction and our contact with white supremacy and what it robbed us of as a Jewish people? That is the beginning of any story I am going to tell as an unapologetic Black Jewish woman when we start talking about what anti-Semitism is. It robbed me of my people. Post-1000 AD, we had the establishment of the Catholic Church, the Crusades, the canonization of the New Testament, anti-Semitism came to be applied systematically in the hatred and mistreatment of Jews. Though in many countries, it wasn't just Jews that Christianity was against. In 2019, anti-Semitism continues to be the systematic discrimination against, denigration, or oppression of Jews, Judaism, and the cultural, intellectual, and religious heritage of Jewish people. But if people who do not take this experience of oppression and take it all the way back to the beginning of white supremacy, we have lost. Often when we talk about white supremacy, when we talk about the idea of anti-Semitism, we don't often talk about Christian hegemony. We don't talk about how deeply rooted European Christianity and anti-Semitism is, the way it created an ideological oppression that targeted Jews, where it was connected to the economic system, to the Christian ruling class, diverting blame for most of the economic hardship that Europe endured, putting that blame onto Jews to create social upheaval that would create the pogroms, that would cause people on Easter to leave their churches and go attack Jews. Why? Because the monarchs weren't to be blamed. It was those Jews. Yes? How well do we honor that history and how we have to call our siblings into account for the history of anti-Semitism that goes deep into the roots of the church? Like all oppressions, it has deep historical roots and uses exploitation, marginalization, discrimination, and violence as its tools. Like all oppressions, the ideology contains elements of dehumanization and degradation via lies and stereotypes about Jews, as well as mythology. With every generation, the myth changes and adapts to different times and places. But fundamentally, it says that Jews are to blame for society's problems. Now, if we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, any place that you can tell that this mythology about Jews is alive and well is a place where oppression has to be eradicated. There's a way in which in our country we have had to figure out our relationship to anti-Semitism as our relationship to anti-oppression. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too. I say in every generation the mythology changes, yes? I just did a search for anti-Semitism on the internet. And look at what I found. Let's take a close look at it, because this is as old as history itself. The Jewish brain, if you pull a Jewish brain out of a Jewish person's head, what you're going to find is the central focus, the center of the brain is world domination. The front of the brain is a frontal money roll. Underneath that is compulsive lying olfactory, and right above that is the Holocaust Memory Center. Beneath the Holocaust Memory Center is the self-pity gland. And behind, underneath, is the Terrorism Center, which is right next door to the racism, the stealing, and the facing consequences gland. And right next above that is the Talmud sensory, war, and elitism. Ladies and gentlemen, and siblings and family, welcome to the Jewish brain. Now, the reason why I brought this in is because to some extent, somebody here sometime has heard a joke, has heard an allusion to some of this, yes? And we say, right? It was just a joke, ha, very funny. What I'm saying to you about anti-Semitism is that the way in which white supremacy has come in on our community has left us with this as our societal space in which to operate. If this is what you're running from, I don't care how much access and resource you get in society. This is your shadow. This is your shadow. Is that free? Is that liberation? Is that justice? No. So even whether you see Jews in access and positions of power or not, we have to constantly remember history in order to understand the shadow of self-consciousness that Jews tend to live in. I was in Canada, and I was having a session on anti-Semitism, and I showed this thing, and I told people, what does it mean to live in the shadow? This is with a group of Jewish leaders. And the Jewish man said to me, you know, when I go out to a dinner, I'm aware of the fact that I'm conscious of how much I leave for the tip. And I said, say a little bit more. Right? What do you mean? He says, I'm a little scared that if I leave too little of a tip and the person knows somehow that I'm Jewish, he's going to call me cheap. So over the course of a lifetime, this man has paid out over the course of a lifetime, how many dollars has this man paid out for being in the shadow of this? That's reality. That's anti-Semitism too. It is not just a swastika on a door. It's living in the shadow of how we have been historically oppressed as a people and where we've been wrong. So I gotta go to the Muslim thing now. Now, before we get to anti-Semitism and Muslims, I gotta tell you something. I am an unapologetic Black Jewish woman, and my family has a relationship with Islam. The reason why they have a relationship with Islam and with Muslims is because my father and mother came up in the 60s and in communities where people were trying to find their liberation as people of color. Muslim communities, the Nation of Islam, was there offering dignity, was there offering respect. My father was a young man who had lost his mother at 7. He was an intellectual. He called himself a world scientist. But when the 5% came to his neighborhood and saw him, they welcomed him. And they said, come, you come and learn with us, and with us we will figure out how to save our nation. You are not just a young man. You are a member of the 5% that is responsible for helping to uplift our community and move us out of the subjugation we are in. So my father, at 16, became Hashim. H-A-S-H-I-M for him was he, Allah, Savior, he, I, Master. That was the name they gave him. You don't just have a name. Your name now has the name of God. The name now has the idea that you can be a master of your own life, and also included the name of Allah. 16. Now, by the time my father was 19, he was an Orthodox Jew. But at 16, when he was a member of 5%, the fire in his soul was lit that the world is not just about me, that I'm connected to something bigger than myself, that it is my responsibility to go out in the world and do justice and be better. And you know who gave that to him? The nation of Islam. Baruch Hashem. Now, in the idea of being He Allah Savior, He I Master, when Hashim converted with an Orthodox rabbi in East Flatbush to become a Jew, he decided not to change his name. To this day, he is still Hashim. But the reason why he is Hashim is because he also took on an intersectional identity and decided to take on the identity of Husham. Do you know who Husham is? Husham was the son of Esau, who when Esau came to try to keep them, when Esau tried to keep them from burying in Me'arat HaMachpelah, which was the official burial ground of the matriarchs and patriarchs, he wanted his place. So when the children of Esau came and said, no, children of Israel, you cannot come and bury Jacob here, because Jacob had gone down to Egypt, remember? So when they tried to bring him up from Egypt and get him buried, Esau said, no, actually this is our place. And Husham, who was deaf, who couldn't see everything, he couldn't hear what the argument was, saw that they were resisting this beautiful effort to be able to return Jacob to his homeland, and he walked up and sliced off Esau's head. Activist. So, he kept the name. He said, oh, I like that. I know who that is. Okay, I'll keep that. So Hashim became Husham. But what Hashim also did is he also gave me an appreciation for the fact that you can find the path to God, to our God, to Hashem, anywhere. It is about the spirit. It's about what motivates you. It's about the fire that lights you to see in the world that there is something bigger than yourself. So I got that from my father, and what I'm bringing you here about anti-Semitism is this idea that many people believe today, when we talk about anti-Semitism, that we are in relationship with a long and historical and organized push against the Jewish people within Islam. And I need to be able to say to you, as an intersectional Jewish womanist, that the historic anti-Semitism in the medieval period differed in Muslims' lands, and the discrimination practiced against non-Muslims was of general nature and not specifically targeted at Jews. What this means is that in medieval Islam, many groups were considered deviant, that it was a religious discrimination. It wasn't an ethnic or racial one. And yet from the time anti-Semitism came out of the church, it was always racial. It was always blood. It was always ethnic. You could not escape it. It was in the systems, it was in the laws, it was in the economy. So when we talk about the derivation of anti-Semitism, we need to understand historically the difference between Islam and Christianity in terms of what happened to our people. We are unapologetic. It all has to go. But we have to understand what the differences were. So when we talk about it now, we're not going back to a mythological history. We have to go back to a history that actually we lived through. Many Muslims held negative stereotypes regarding Jews throughout Islamic history. These stereotypes were also different from European anti-Semitism because unlike Christians, Muslims who view Jews as objects of ridicule, not fear. In Christian anti-Semitism, they added deicide, hate, fear, envy, and contempt. Why? Because we were supposed to be the people who the New Testament taught had killed Jesus. And I'm talking about year 1000, when the New Testament became canonized by Constantine, yes, until now, there has been a myth that Jews have been responsible for the killing of God itself, and that it's in their blood. Yes, it's a racial thing. So when people come at you and say, you can't escape this primordial sin, yes, they're coming after your life. They're coming after your body. They're not asking you to step off the side of the street or wear different clothing, but you can but you can still operate among us. You can still flourish even at times. They're saying that by endemically, in your body, in your blood, you are poisoned and inferior. And you know what that sounds a lot like? Racism. So we have to understand where you come from and understand that like all oppressions, anti-Semitism has deep historical roots. Its roots are in exploitation, marginalization, discrimination, and violence. But like all oppressions, the ideology contains elements of our very dehumanization and degradation via lies and stereotypes and mythology. So just a little history about what we're talking about. As we go into anti-Semitism in 2019, it's important to understand another thing about anti-Semitism, because this brings us to the story. All of these stories that I tell you about each of these terms is going to end with, and how do we ground it as Jewish women of color. But before we get there, we have to understand that there's a way in which Jews have been positioned to navigate between those who are in power and economic straits and those who have less power in society. And when that happened, Jews were often set up to be in professions like money lending. Why money lending? Because by Christianity, you can't lend money. So those evil Jews actually can lend the money, because we still need money lending as something to be done in society. So let's have the Jews do it. Tax collection. Why? Because usury is against the Christian religion. Liquor sales. Why? Because we can't do that either. So what are we doing? We are setting up Jews to play a role in society that is not welcome by the broader Christian society, yes? But the Jews do it. That way, when people get upset, what will they remember? Not that you did people a favor, but that the Jews are the ones who are bringing evil into our society. Yes? Yosef Yerushalmi dubbed a term called royal alliances. And what this means is that because we were often put in as agents, shields, and scapegoats between those with more and less power in society, we learned as part of our survival to make alliances with those in power. Because if we could get alliances with those in power, then that might save us, for the masses to rise up, right? From not having resources and attack us. At least if we had the protection of the rulers, we might be okay. Now this becomes problematic. The reason why this becomes problematic is because when people who are being oppressed see Jews in a position of privilege and power that has been granted or that they have even sought as part of survival, they do exactly what's been set up to do. They say, oh, it's the Jews. The reason why we're suffering is the Jews. And I have heard in 2019 those same things that are in that brain that I showed you in our social justice movement. The reason why we are here in this situation we're in right now is because of the money and the power of the Jewish community. Anyone in our social justice movement who does not understand how far that goes back in the history of anti-Semitism is missing a deep part of what it means to operate from anti-oppression. When it came to the Women's March, this came up between us as Jews of color and the African American community. Because what we saw is that for some reason, there seemed to be an assertion that anti-Semitism actually was more prevalent in African American communities than in any others. And what we saw in that was some of this interstitial relationship. Why do we believe that women of color are the ones who have the most power to be able to impact our communities as Jews? Is it not because racism has taught that a Black woman's body is the foundation in which we run whatever our fears, whatever our thoughts, whatever our objectivations are, can be encompassed within a Black woman's body, yes? She has no agency of her own. She has no thoughts, mindset of her own. She is just a container to be filled by whatever angst society holds. And how do I know that? Because there are various and specific ways in which Black women have lived through this. How many of you have seen The Color Purple? I want you to remember with me the scene between Sophia, remember Sophia, Oprah Winfrey, right? And when she got to go home for Christmas after having been put in jail for many, many years for defending her family in a group of white men. They all beat her down, put her in jail for 20 years, and then a white woman comes to the jail and says, "Don't you want to be my maid?" Takes her home, yes? But then zoom forward maybe 10 more years. She hasn't seen her family in close to 30 years. The white woman decides that she's going to be generous and let her go home for Christmas, yes? So Sophia packs herself up. They go down to the black neighborhood. She's driving her new car, which she's just learned how to drive, and they pull up in front of the house where Sophia's family lives. They get there, and she says, "Okay, Sophia, you go in and see your family." So Sophia, who's bent over from the oppression, essentially, of having been in jail and subjugated for many, many years, shuffles slowly toward the house. As she gets into the house, her family is essentially overwrought with emotion. And just as she's taking off her coat, she hears the spluttering and the stopping of the car outside. And the white woman who has brought her home is hollering and screaming. Who is she hollering and screaming at? All of her family, the males who have gone out to try to help her back out of the driveway, but essentially she can't back out of the driveway because she's just got this new car and she doesn't know how to do it. But every time they get near her car, she starts screaming, "Stop, stop, don't come near me! I've been so good to you people!" So her racism is keeping her from even holding the people, letting the people who want to help her help her. But here's the thing about what I'm telling you about a black woman's body and how it shows up in white supremacy. What she says after a while is, "Sophia, you need to come back out here." Why does Sophia need to come back out here? Because Sophia, in her relationship to her family, was secondary to Sophia's ability to be this white woman's servant. And how do we know this? Because the fact that Sophia hadn't seen her family in 30 years, that she had offered her a gift, that she had brought her all the way across town, that her family was in tears wanting to see her, meant nothing next to the fact that she was terrified that a bunch of coloreds were trying to help her to drive and she didn't want to be that close, and she's screaming and hollering, "I don't know you people, back up," right? The only one who could actually get her back home was Sophia. So Sophia's entire body and agency became encompassed within the imagination of a white woman only. That's just one example of what I mean when I say a black woman's agency and a black woman's body is constantly being the surface of other people's imagination. What other people say it's valued as. Not agency of her own. Now, there are many other stories that I can tell you about this, but the reason why I'm bringing it up here is because when our community of Jews got worried about anti-Semitism, we didn't check in about agency. The first thing we did was live in our own imagination about anti-Semitism. We didn't check in with Tamika Mallory, who shared with me directly that the reason why she was not going to denounce Minister Farrakhan was because she had a story similar to the one I just told you, which is that when in her community gang violence became prevalent and her husband was killed and left in a ditch to the point where he couldn't be recognized, it was the Nation of Islam that went and helped her to find that body. It was the Nation of Islam who gave her voice and agency to be able to become an activist, to help her to start fighting for social justice in the criminal justice system. It was they who would go with her into prisons to be able to help save young boys from being like the ones that took her husband's life. It was all of that history that she felt connected to and did not feel connected to a Jewish community that had not shown up on gun violence, that had not shown up on issues of gangs, that had not shown up in any of the criminal justice spaces where she had been fighting for 20 years, yet demanded on the basis of our imagination how a black woman's body and voice was meant to show up, and also retranslated that woman's voice in the context of a man's vision and imagination around who Jews were and were not. I'm not going to go there about this thing with Minister Farrakhan, because what he said and what he's not said has been in the books, in articles, and publicly known for most of my lifetime. There's nothing he has said that is not new to me. There's nothing that he said that is excusable. There's nothing that he said that should be validated, that should be excused, or that should be made apologies for. Anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism, but retranslating a Black woman's voice and body in the context of our white imagination, that's a reason for pause. It is a reason for pause. So all I'm going to tell you is that some of that is how we got to this derivation of anti-Semitism in Jewish women of color. We decided to go to the march, but we went to the march because we were holding on to our own agency as Jews and as people of color. And what that looked like is we said Jewish women of color reject any assertion that there is more anti-Semitism in African American communities than in others, and any belief that African American leaders, and women specifically, should be singled out for particular attention toward addressing the impacts of the growing presence of anti-Semitism in our world. We reject the idea that Black women's bodies are the locale and the nexus for anything that we're gonna call the spot where we have to fight anti-Semitism. It goes back so much further than that. And because it goes back so much further than that, we want connection to anti-oppression. So we are not going to say that anti-Semitism lives in African American communities more than it lives in the white church. More than it lives in people who use the church and white supremacy simultaneously to continue to subjugate. Yes? So of the 1986, Jews like numbers. So we went to the numbers, yes? Anti-Defamation League looked at it. 1,986 anti-Semitic incidents were submitted by the Anti-Defamation League in 2017. Guess how many of those were committed by people of color? 3. Okay, 3. Yet we were up in arms about the bodies of African American women. As white nationalists continue to historically and presently organize themselves as Jews. The man who went into Pittsburgh had on the clothing that I would see in any Starbucks in the suburb of Newton in which I live on a regular. That terrified me. It terrified me because in an LL Bean hat, yes, and a zipped up parka, he looked like my neighbor. Did I have agency as a Jew to name that as why I was coming home and locking my door? Because living in a white neighborhood in order to go to a Jewish synagogue made me and my children no longer feel safe walking at night and coming to our home without locking a door. Is that anti-Semitism? When we decided to align ourselves in Jewish communities across the nation with the police and bring people with guns into federations, into synagogues, into Jewish educational institutions, into our places of business, because we did not feel safe. Did it make me and mine and all the people of color that I live with feel any more safe to now be facing folks that can't tell the difference between us and criminals on a regular and daily basis, now in the places we go seeking God and places of worship? Did that make us feel more safe? Did that end anti-Semitism for us? Okay, so we're talking about anti-Semitism, and we said, wait, we got to pay attention to the details. We got to pay attention to the data. As Jewish women of color, we are committed to and united with our Jewish family and allies to fighting the growing threat of white supremacist and white nationalist violence wherever it exists in our country. And we are clear that this threat is not coming chiefly from our allies in social justice movements. Anti-Semitism within our social justice movement remains a family problem because just as Jews have been oppressed historically and are part of the fabric of oppression, we must continue to stay in relationship to teach everyone who is engaged in the idea and in the vocation of reaching for justice that anti-Semitism is a part of that. We are not going to be able to do that by the way we're behaving right now. Anti-Semitism exists in all communities, as does racism, sexism, homophobia, and a host of other oppressions that must be our goal as a society to eradicate, we said. In communities of color, Jews are seen as the face of power, and a distorted sense of who the Jewish people are and who Jews of color are as a result has developed to our detriment. Because of the way white supremacy, I told you that story about year 1000, right? Because of the way white supremacy has hit our community, most folks don't know the difference between Jewish and white. You say Jewish, you can put an equal sign and put white next to it and nobody will blink. But what does that do to the fact that we are a people who grew up in the middle of the Middle East and Africa? Is that equal sign white? How is anybody supposed to tell the difference between us and the colonization and the imperialism that white supremacy has sanctioned if we don't take the time to tell our own history differently and show the difference? In the context of this, we as women of color say we will stand in our intersectionality. We are not going to allow for that equal sign between Jewish and whiteness, not because we have a bone to pick or because we have a chip on our shoulders, because the idea of not doing that spells freedom for our entire community. Jews will not be free until they can be their whole selves without leaving half of us behind. So now I'm going to talk to you about racism, okay? Racism. If we're going to talk about racism in the Jewish social justice context, we're going to have to talk about our relationship to whiteness. How did we get white? Now, I know there's that book out there, How Jews Became White Folk, but I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the ways in which we understand in this country that whiteness isn't a color. Whiteness is a system of complex and systematic ways of being politically and socially constructed. It's behaviors, it's learned behaviors, it's values, it's positions of power. If you like, I can send you this whole little paragraph. I'm not going to read it right now. But you need to get proximate to what is the nature of whiteness. Because whiteness has come in on us as Jews. It is not our history. It has come in on us as Jews. And the ways in which we've reached for whiteness as a method of our survival has also left us robbed. So we got to get rid of that. We got to take a look at what privilege looks like in this particular country. What are the system of unearned advantages that came to people who identified with that whiteness thing? How did it end up creating a system of feeling like you're one up or one down in society, and as a result, we act out behaviors that follow that through? I don't care who you are, all of us, including me, are in relationship with privilege. My daughter goes to Princeton. She goes to Princeton. We are privileged. My husband's a doctor, I'm a CEO, we live in Newton, right? We are privileged black folk. But we are woke privileged black folk. And what that means is that you don't get to have privilege without making choices. You don't get to have privilege without naming that you've got privilege. Now, some people say privilege, you think it got stamped on your head by the time you were born. You seen any baby come out of a mother's womb and got privilege printed over here, like a birthmark? No, it's a series of choices. So I try to be in relationship with my privilege on a daily. And being a Jew and in relationship with my privilege means that when Atara goes to Princeton, I make sure that she understands that that does not make her better or worse than any other person walking in the world. It's given her an opportunity to serve. An opportunity to serve. So how are we in relationship with privilege? How are we in relationship with white fragility? White fragility is this idea that if you start talking about whiteness, people start feeling bad. And they start crying and get upset, and all of a sudden you can't have the conversation anymore. Now, I am your sister. The only reason why I do this work is because I love the Jewish people deeply. I love all of my people deeply, or I would not be here 20 years into it still doing it. So I'm here because I love my people. But as I love my people, I need them to be not fragile enough to be able to hear the truth. There's nothing I said to you tonight that you can't go look up. And if you don't trust me, go look it up. Because like Dr. King and Malcolm X, I research and I research and I research again before I say anything in public, because I know somebody's going to call me on it. So go look. There's nothing that I've said here that can't be looked up. But what I want you to say is, as Jews, we've lived across 5,000 years and we are still here. And as a result, we know we are not fragile. We are resilient. So as Jews, we are resilient. And if we are resilient, maybe we as a people will be the ones to deal with whiteness. Maybe we as a people will be the ones to give up white supremacy, to give back that access and privilege, and say it is not needed for us to be valued. It is not needed for us to be liberated. I don't need you to tell me, Christian hegemony, whether I'm valued or not. I was valued from the time I was born. How can we as Jews find our way to that kind of liberation and stop living in relationship to the shadow? I want us, when it comes to racism, to look at the idea of what I told you about that list. I didn't make it up. You go look at a derivation of Jewish history, all of a sudden 1,000, all the Middle Eastern and African people disappear. That's because we're operating in something called Ashkenormativity. Ashkenormativity is this thing where we create a hierarchy of all of our folks who came from Europe. Can we stop doing that in the name of eradicating white supremacy and getting out of the shadow of anti-Semitism? Can we also notice the ways in which we're acting out microaggressions? Because that thing in our head, I mean, I talk to women sometimes and I tell them that, you know how you get into microaggressions? Because, you know, sometimes you walk into a space as a woman, and before you can get out the elevator, you hear this little, like, tiny radio station that's playing, "We're all men, we're all men, don't you want to be men, don't you want to be men?" And before you can even get to your desk, you're hearing that, "We're all men," and it's such a catchy darn rhyme, it starts playing in your head for the whole first year that you're trying to integrate, yes? Why? Because that is the way it works. It's micro, it's subtle, but it's in there. There are recordings that are playing in our heads all the time about dominance, feeling one up, and feeling one down to somebody else in society. How can we pay attention to those things and make sure that they aren't creating biases between us and others that are actually making those biases systemic? Whether they're conscious or unconscious doesn't matter. If they're playing out to sustain oppression in society, it's our work. So some of this, I like to be very practical. So some of this I brought, it looks like this. Asking a person of color that enters a synagogue or your organization where the membership is white in majority, are you lost? Why? Because Jewish institutions represent who? White folk? Not after tonight. You're in a synagogue, you're lost. Can you read a prayer book? One Jew of color said to me, you know, no, actually I just wandered in after a good cup of coffee and I just thought I would come in here and sit with you good people. Something in our head is making a hierarchy of value between what Jewish is, what it looks like, who is literate, who is not, who is fluent, who is stranger, who is other, who is central. It's happening very quickly, but it's all of our responsibility if we're going to be activists about this, right? And give it up. Asking people of color when they converted and continuing to curry, and your parents, and your parents' parents, and your parents' parents, you could go all the way back to year 1000 if you wanted to. But the bottom line is, do we do that to folks who are Ashkenazi and show up phenotypically as white? Or do we only do that to certain people who are among us? We're assuming somewhere in our head that it's about whiteness. I'm going to just give one more and then continue because we're heading up on time. Following people of color around Jewish events and taking their pictures to put them up in the marketing materials. Okay, now I'm sure this is not just happening to Jewish people of color. Any person who has had the lovely opportunity of integrating a white majority environment, we have to be paying attention to this idea that we are people, not talking points, not marketing measures, whole people. So if you haven't taken the time to sit down and discuss with the person, hi, what is important to you? How do you value the organization? Is there something in particular we can invite you into leadership on? Do not take their picture and plaster it on the brochure. Because it's objectification then. It's not an invitation to leadership. So, racism and Jews of color. This is how we talked about it in the context of the Women's March, and I wanted to share that. I said all of these things that I'm teaching with you go back to grounding and centralization about what it means to be unapologetic, womanist, and unapologetically Black and Jewish in this moment. For us, it meant that Jews of color and Jewish women of color in particular have been organizing and taking action in U.S. social justice movements since the beginning, but have not been seen. When I came back from the Women's March, someone wrote a whole article about the impossibility that Jews of color had been a part of the social justice movement. It was so impossible because they're such a small and marginalized group. So it's impossible that they would have been able to figure out themselves in the 60s and shown up in any way that could possibly have looked like leadership. 3 pages from not just anybody. This is a Jewish scholar who wrote this because her feelings were up, yes? But the truth is that my grandfather wore something they called a freedom cap in the civil rights movement. And many other people who weren't even Jewish, if any of you were there, know, wore these little black beanies in solidarity with Jews because they were called freedom caps because they were the white folks who were showing up. Yes? He organized security for Dr. King, and he did it as a Jew. How does somebody's imagination and allowing our black Jewish bodies to be the locale of their imagination without checking in, without asking questions, without getting in relationship, allow them to write 3 full pages of mythological nonsense, and nobody wrote, oh, did somebody check out that, if that's historically true or not? These are the things that we have to grapple with. We're going to talk about being in social justice spaces and standing up fully and in integrity against racism. As Jewish women of color, our commitment is to black Jewish women, and this means addressing anti-black racism in Jewish communities and beyond. Often the work of racism that we do has often been the work of us as a Jewish community to save those folks from those terrible folks who burn crosses in Mississippi. No, it's actually the work of us to save our own poor, unfortunate souls. Where have we dug into Jewish institutional spaces to look at where racism lives among us, where it looks like internalized oppression, where there are spaces inside of us that gotta get cleaned up in order for us to be free? That's what we're asking for. There is no standing up for Jewish spaces and Jewish social justice. Does not include a deep and intensive look at anti-black racism in Jewish communities and beyond. We also said, look, time's up. Jewish women of color exist in our own power. We have no need to be retranslated. This is, often people will say, well, I heard that Jews of color said, haven't had a conversation with Jews of color yet. I know Jews of color feel, haven't picked up the comb called Jew of color yet. This is what it means to be retranslated. What it means to be talked over. It means that we say this is a Jewish institutional priority, and you do not check in with the full depth and breadth of what it means to be Jewish. You're only talking about white Jews. You're only talking about Jews of a certain economic bracket. You're only talking about Jews who belong to certain institutions. Who's Jewish? Don't ask me, are you Jewish? Ask you, are you Jewish? When you say Jewish, don't retranslate and talk over people who have been marginalized. Don't fetishize us. Don't go, oh, how cute it was. It was so beautiful. The Jews of color stood up for themselves. Oh, did you see the video? We weren't standing up for ourselves. When I stood on that stage, I said it was pikuach nefesh, which means saving lives. I went there to save my own unfortunate soul and to save the soul of our people. Because I've been on a call the week before, and 45 different institutions refused to go to a march that was the largest and most substantial chant that I had seen in my lifetime for women to get free, for black women to get free, for me and my people to get free. 45 different Jewish institutions were about to walk out on that. So I didn't go because I wanted to be cute. I didn't go because I wanted my picture on NBC. I went to save my own and our communal Jewish life. So don't fetishize us. Don't sign us up for service. We would like to navigate as leaders within the Jewish community, but we want to do it by saying that our commitments can link us together across a spectrum of diverse entry points. Jewish social justice does not have to be monolithic, because when anything is monolithic in the context of oppression, it's usually servicing 1 or 2 groups. Are we checking in to make sure that our Jewish social justice and that our service can spread? They call it in churches, does it preach forward? Does our Jewish social justice preach forward? Does it go in our community, but also out of our community in a way that allows people to say yes? When we showed up, I'm going to tell you, this is the last thing I'm going to say before we move on. We showed up at the Women's March. We parted 1 million people to get to this event. 75 Jewish women of color and 200 of our allies parted by marshals, 1 million people to get to the front, because they asked us to come to the front. They knew the risks we bore to try to come. They asked us to come to the front. So we parted through 1 million people. And as we walked through, many of the Jewish women of color that were there started to cry. You know why? Because to the right and to the left of us, in 1 million people, people were saying things like, wow, the Jews are here. Wow, look, it's the Jews. Now, for some people that might have been like, really? But for us, to be acknowledged in that way, as we parted a sea, the same weekend that the Torah portion spoke about the parting of the Red Sea at the Yam Suf, made us cry and feel like we were completely in our power. And as we moved, we kept track of each other by saying, jaywalk to the front, jaywalk to the front. And so even if you couldn't see us because you were 200 people behind, you heard a voice in front of you saying, jaywalk to the front. And when we got to the front, and this is the thing I want you to remember, when we got to the front, this was the first time in history that Jewish social justice activists led 1 million people in social action in this country. It has never happened before. It was historic. It's because when we were held inward, preached forward. It resonated with other people who were also holding social justice. And they felt like that was our place and that is where we belonged. Now you hold that vision of social justice. What is it going to take for us and what we do as Jewish social justice activists to preach forward to the place where it's not just 75 Jewish women of color next time. It's not 200 allies that didn't want to see us go there and be alone. It's our entire people that has the capacity to understand our history and our capacity to make change in this world that is so compelling that the world says, Jews to the front. That is the day that I'm looking for. Not because I need it. I don't need it. It's because I do believe that after having lived through 5,000 years of persecution and oppression, we know something about liberation. And I'll be damned if white supremacy is going to steal it from us. So that's that. The last thing I want to say to you is this. I'm talking for a while because I got to go carry what he said. This is what I want to say. Our call to action is for you to think about what your leadership choice points are. I never come to a group just to talk a lot and to be, at the best. So, I come because I want you to think about your choice points. You have choice points, every single one of you sitting here. Whether it be on a personal, interpersonal, systemic, institutional, or cultural level. There are choices you're making about your relationship with anti-Semitism, racism, intersectionality, and white supremacy. We as Jews have work to do. We can't do it by ourselves. We need partners. We need allies. We need folks to say anti-Semitism has no place in the movement. We also need folks to say racism has no place in the movement. We also need folks to walk that walk every day by checking yourself in your mind to where that elevator music is playing and where you're living into it, giving it up. So what are your leadership choice points? How are you going to go home tonight and have a conversation with somebody about how you can live that? What are new and courageous equity outcomes that you can imagine? I didn't know that I was going to end up on this steering committee. I didn't know that I was going to end up in front of a million people at the Women's March. I didn't know it 2 weeks before it happened. I didn't know it. But there was something that you say, it's in your kishkas, yeah? That's what I'm going to say. It's in your guts right here. And when the question falls out of the universe, and it says, are you going to do right? Are you going to stand on the side of right? Hopefully something in your kishkas about how you've been grooming that muscle up until that point when the question comes to you will help you stand up and say, yes. Yes. And I didn't say yes from a place of knowing everything. I said yes like Nachshon. The guy who walked into the sea and the sea rose up to his neck. He said, by virtue of his faith, he caused the sea to split. And we know right inside of that. So I ask you to make a choice. Make a choice today. All that matters to you. Make sure you know
So I think many of us just want to sit and bask in what you just did for a good 45 minutes. I have the unenviable position of moving us to some questions and follow-up. And I was so glad that you brought up that story of parting the sea of the people. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why that was important physically and in an embodied way, why it wasn't just a mental exercise, what it actually happening in real time, how that elevated the experience or amplified the experience.
So there's another teaching that my father taught me. My father, I think, taught me so much that resonates in my head right now in these times that are so perilous that I never knew I would face. But one of the things he taught me about the prayer Az Yashir, which is a part of the Miriam song, was that when they said Zeh Keli V'Anvehu, this is my God and I shall celebrate, it was because the level of prophecy that was reached by the entire nation, plus all those that had come out of Egypt with the children of Israel, that they all shared the same level of prophecy to the point where they could take their fingers and point and say, Zeh, this is the liberation that I have been waiting for. So there's a way that reaching a point where in your body you can actually feel something that leaves an imprint is important in regard to social justice work. I didn't know that until I lived in my lifetime into that. I heard a lot of our elders and the folks who came before me talk about the March on Washington and what it felt like to be in that sea of people in the mall listening to Dr. King and the other leaders that spoke. And they would talk about it almost like in an ethereal, otherworldly way. But both in 2017 and in 2019. In 2017, when I was standing with Dove Kent and I looked out up the streets of Washington and it literally looked like snow. But the snow was human bodies. And the snow just kept coming and coming and coming. And when I saw that with my own eyes in my own body, I realized I was part of something bigger than myself. All of those people had signs. All of those people had something to say about democracy in our country and about having a dream for an America that they actually cared about. I had questions before then. We all have our little platforms and the things we talk about, but you never know whether you actually care until you come out into the street and you're willing to stand for it in your voice and in your body. And so I saw that in 2017, which was a Zeh. And then being with Jewish women of color, I've spent the last 3 to 5 years empowering Jewish women of color as a constituency because they have been targeted. Like I said, they have been erased, they have been tokenized, we have been left out of so many spaces. And rather than wait for our community to figure out how to empower and change systems to make space for us, I have been blessed to be able to create space for them in my own space, right? To give them resources on their own time. And so to be with them at the front, with us marching and standing in our principles and having the world say amen in that way, and to invite us to the front and to invite us to actually speak to the principles that we live out every day, that is something I will never forget for the rest of my life. And it's not just, I won't forget it just for Jewish women of color. I won't forget it for anybody, any woman who needs to understand that her voice is valuable, that her voice can be heard across myriads and be acclaimed and be applauded and be remembered. And that we as women can do that for each other. Nobody will ever be able to take that away from me or any of the people that went to do that. So it makes us better warriors, I think.
In services, after somebody talks the way you do, we just have to be quiet for a little while and, let the embers fall. But I want to go back to the Women's March, and you said that you had your platform coming in, and you had your things, as we all did, and those were some dicey days.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I actually collect Midrash. We should talk later about Nachshon, because there's the image of him going in solo, but there's also some other ones you probably know where he's pushed in. There's also some where he fights with the others to be the first. I like the darker ones.
I like the darker ones too.
Because they're more real to me, right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder, in a way, like you're pushed in.
Yeah.
You're handed this opportunity. I wonder what was tested for you? What did you learn? Or did it just reconfirm things that you were aspiring towards? Tell me a little bit about what went on internally up until that glorious moment.
I don't know whether it was about glory yet. I didn't really get clear that this was actually something I needed to do until I could find my people and have them affirm that this is something they wanted to do too. I'm a leader that believes deeply in collectivism. And so I don't want to be walking anywhere by myself. It's dangerous, number one. Number two, you need to be in league with folks who share your common values, because once you get there, you don't know what's going to happen. So once it became clear across a good number of, let's say, 10, 12 Jewish women of color that I trust with my life, that said, yes, we want to do this together, this is a moment for us together, then I knew I was going. How it was going to happen in regard to what was going to happen within the broader community, there were two things that were happening. One was people were kind of shifting from one foot to the other for a long time, up until I think even the last week before the march. But I kept asking people, I know what you stand against. I stand against those things too. What do you stand for? Tell me what you stand for. If I could hear what you stand for, then I would know if I too stand against. But tell me what you stand for. And so few of us had any idea what they stood for in the context of the march, that they would still be willing to march for, whether it was in Washington or any other place. What do you stand for? And so what became really important to me in the weeks leading up to the march was trying to get clear that even after going to the march, that I would have to come back to our communities and continue to ask us that question. What do you stand for? If you were leading the march, what would it look like? If there's something that is deeply valuable to you about this moment in regard to justice and equity, what do you want to say that preaches forward? Because I think we have to have that clear. If we don't have that clear and we're trying to ride on somebody else's bus, that's only going to take us but so far. Because as soon as the fire starts, as soon as somebody throws a rock or somebody shoots out the tires, you're getting off that bus and you're going home. You got to know, what do you stand for? So I'm still asking that question. That was most important to me, going to the march and leaving, to know and be really clear for all of us as Jewish social justice activists, what do we stand for?
So what do you stand for?
I said it in a bunch of statements.
All right.
Mostly I stand for deep love and belief in our Jewish community. It's in me and I can't seem to get it out. There have been real reasons over the course of my lifetime, given the amount of prejudice and bias and even racism that I've experienced in Jewish spaces. I say to you that it's a testimony to me that I'm still here, how much I love the Jewish people, because I stand for this idea that no one who has had oppression run at them is unredeemable. No one who someone has tried to steal their spirit, their dignity, their humanity, has to give in to that. So in all the ways that we as a Jewish people have been subjugated to that kind of oppression, I'm like longing for what we look like outside of that oppression, that the world is still waiting for us to live into. Those are the things that I dream about. And I believe in our people's ability to get there. And I know that something about me being a Jewish woman of color is about sticking with folks, even while they can't see themselves, till the day when they can. And that means living through a lot, but it's only about that belief and only about that love. And I have to thank my ancestors and elders for that, because I didn't come to that myself. They taught me such a deep love for what it means to be a Jewish person, that it was worth the sacrifice, that it was worth all that we went through, that I can't seem to give it up. And I've had many opportunities, but I'm not gonna give it up, because it's about my soul and my spirit and my dignity and my humanity, and nobody gets to steal that away from me or any of us, so.
you draw the circle, if you do, around who does Jewish, the Jewish? I wonder what you think of. I had already played my cards with you and told you maybe these aren't my favorite words, but I'd be curious to hear you react to the words Jewish peoplehood, Jewish continuity. What would you do with that whole part of the heavy? I mean, those are words that are heavily used in heavy rotation. How do you react to them? What might you use instead of them? How do you draw a circle around?
I don't know. I just think those words have been thrown around a lot as almost like dog whistles for folks with privilege and access gather around the table and decide what the rest of us need. Like that's what bothers me about it. I think if we really actually took the time to explore what Jewish peoplehood was, you would end up on my timeline back at 1000. You would also start looking at who is living on the margins, who has been heard, who has not been heard. And somehow, all the conversations that I, as a Jewish professional over 20 years, have had the blessing of being invited to the table for, is always led by, most of the time, white men with white hair, of a certain class bracket. Now, that doesn't mean that we as women are not making strides, but we are still not in our full power across Jewish institutional leadership, as women, period, as diverse women, and then as people of color, and then as GLBT community, as, you know, I could keep going, as people with disabilities, and on and on and on. Somewhere in here, if you ask me, I feel like we bought into the model of white supremacy that said in order to survive, we've got to look and be and show up in the world a certain way to affirm our own power. What if we were so strong that we could be vulnerable? What if we were so strong that all of us counted? What if we were so strong that no Jew anywhere deserved to be left behind? Then you could say Jewish peoplehood, because they were like, yeah, we some badass Jews. But for right now, the way we are, we've got so much work to do. I don't want to sit at tables that exclude. I don't want to sit at tables that remarginalize. I don't want to sit at tables that create hierarchies of value amongst us, because it's the best way to show up in the world with power. I'd like all of that to change because I'm a social justice activist. So no, I don't like Jewish peoplehood as it exists right now. And every time I show up, I say so. So that's that.
I know we have to wrap up soon, but I'd love to know, when I hear the world that you describe, I feel like this is the Jewish now. This is it. I feel it. I got chills. I wonder how, teach us how we'll know that we have been successful. And I'm purposely just saying that we will be successful, right? So when I have grandchildren, God willing, when we have our grandchildren, what will they experience, our great-grandchildren? How will we know that, like, we did something right?
I don't know. That's hard for me to say. I can't project that far into the future. The only thing I can say about an experience, because I try to only speak to things that I can be proximate to, I am a grandchild, right? So I can go to the place of knowing that my great-grandmother Naomi, who passed away when I was a very young child, that I still remember her, not because I can pull up memories of her beyond me being 7, but because of the way everyone in my family talks about her and talks about the things she taught us and the way she was in the world and the way other people who knew her affirmed her existence as having mattered. So she lives in me as a matriarch because I live out the values that she lived because she left them in the world, right? So my mother has stories about my grandmother, and my children also have stories about my grandmother. We sing her songs, we feel her music, right? She walks with us, but that's a sign that she actually did something right. I don't know whether if somebody asked her what would matter to you in terms of your great-grandchildren still talking about you, what would you want them to say? I guess because of the way people talk about her, she would say, it's love. You know, she was known to always have 2 pots on her stove because anybody who came to her kitchen always got fed. And not because she was a very rich woman. Mostly my grandfather said it was beans. You know, a big pot of beans with a little bit of meat in it, but it would feed a lot of people, right? So, but she would feed people, and they wouldn't leave her table hungry. And so the idea that that simple way of being that she held preached forward and had ripples and like laid a foundation for grandchildren to come behind her and still want to talk about her. I suppose if we look forward, I would say, what would be the choices we are making now that we would want 3 generations from now people to still be claiming and holding on to as values that are still continue to be important? And that doesn't mean because we're thinking about ourselves. It's because whatever we've said or whatever we've done has such a deep reverberance in humanity that those who know us and don't know us, who got the blessing of being in proximity to us or didn't, still cling to how great it is to have a human being have lived with those values in place that they got to see. Like I feel so deeply blessed to have come up in a family that knew love. So many, and you want to make me cry, so many people who have been targeted, who I've encountered in my life, don't know how to take in love because they didn't get to see love. Don't know how to love themselves because nobody loved them. So when you love deeply and when you show people that they count and that they matter to you from a place of deep love, I think that's revolutionary. And so how are we doing love? How are we doing community? How are we creating beloved spaces? Those are the things that I think will live on after us. I don't think it's a bunch of like, you know, Pew studies or like, you know, outreach and engagement projects, or I don't think it's any of that because I've seen too many of those collect dust on CEOs' shelves. I don't think that's it. I think when you create community that actually stands for love and helps a person heal and live deeper into their humanity, that person is not going to forget it, and generations are not going to forget it. And I think trauma works the same way. When you hurt people and you abuse them or try to steal their dignity, people don't forget that for generations either. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I think this is a good place to stop. I know that there are.
So we're going to, if people have questions that they want to ask Yavilah, if she still has the energy, which I imagine she does, you're welcome to come up. But we're just going to close the program now. So thank you very much, Rabbi Kushner, and thank you, Yavilah.
Actually, if people want to ask me questions in the open space, it's okay, 1 or 2. Because I think rather than 500 people come up here and try to ask me questions, it might be good to just try to answer everybody for 1 or 2 if we can. So if anybody has a question, let's just do 1 or 2, and then I'll stay.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and your wonderful work. My name is Joan Laguatan, and I grew up in San Francisco. I was born in the Philippines. I converted to Judaism 10 years ago, and actually this morning at shul, I told someone I was going to a Jew of Color event tonight, and they said, "Why are you going to that? That's for Black people." And you know, in my experience, personally, I haven't felt tokenized, fetishized, and erased, and I'm just maybe I was oblivious to it, but I'm wondering, do you find that the experience of Black Jews are a lot different from Asian Jews, and that there are shades of, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
So from where I live, especially from a place of intersectionality, I think race is a construct. So Blackness is a construct too. And what it means to construct whiteness and Blackness in Judaism has something to do with all of us. So it doesn't matter really where on the spectrum of color, right, the color binary we fall, there are issues around whether whiteness has become central to what we're calling Judaism, that you and all of us are being impacted by, right? So is there a way in which, even if you haven't been fetishized or marginalized or in any of those things, you bringing the fullness of your history and who you are and where you come from to bear on what you're calling your Judaism has been fully welcomed and placed at the center of any place you navigate as a Jewish woman. That's more of an invitation and an opportunity than an idea to stand, as we do on Yom Kippur and clock your chest about how hard it's been. I don't think this work is about that. I think it's about invitation and opportunity. So the fact that you came tonight, I want you to think about, where does white supremacy live among Jews? And any place that white supremacy lives among any of us has robbed all of us of an experience of a liberated Judaism. And whether you were white or black or purple, doesn't matter, right? Are you, if you're an activist or if in any way enamored by social justice, concerned that Jews get free? That's the question. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Come on.
First, I just want to say thank you for your presentation. It was truly enlightening and challenging. And what I want to ask you, as a woman of color that is Jewish, where do you muster the strength to speak that kind of truth and power in spaces that are traditionally very white?
Yeah. So I have a lot of, my community is diverse. So I have beloveds who are people of color and who are white and who are all sorts across of, a diversity of ethnicities and phenotypes. That's what you would call it, because these days, what is it really, right? So lots of folks in my life, and I find that my white allies have given me strength because they have in many ways taught me that even whiteness is something that you can't completely assume has behind it a very specific set of assumptions. So I'm not right now in a room full of majority white people. I'm in a room of folks who were born with that phenotype, who are capable of making choices. And until I hear otherwise, I assume that people are going to continue making choices to have me and to hold me and to keep me if we are to be in beloved community together. I have to believe that. It doesn't always end up being true. So I'm not, my mother said you can't be so open-minded that your own brain falls out your head. I'm not trying to be, silly or naive, but I think that first assumption that you're in front of another human being who can make the choice to embrace you in beloved community has to be the start. Because if not, then we start telling our own self stories about who we have and who we don't have. And the next thing you know, you're alone and isolated and you don't have anybody. And that is not the best mindset for me to be in my most powerful state. I have to stay resilient. In order to be resilient, I have to come from a place of love too. So that's what gives me the strength, and I wait for it. Okay, y'all don't want to go home, do you? Any other, one more question? Yeah.
So I am here because I actually have 2 classes that suggested that I come. So my question to you, and I hope that I have peers who have this question as well, how can I and others be an ally? I'm a white Christian male, so my intersectionality, among other things, my intersectionality doesn't actually intersect with what you've shared. I'm not going to assume that you don't have others, and that's neither here nor there. But how can I be an ally? How can others like me be an ally?
I think I done said Christian maybe 5 or 6 or 7 times tonight, did I?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's be proximate around that. So we're going to talk about Christianity, right? Before you even get to my community of Jews, there's a long history of the Christian church, right? That started with Emperor Constantine, when, as a result of him trying to unite all the European communities under Rome, right, under the Roman Empire, they practiced a hell of a lot of white supremacy. It wasn't called white supremacy then. It was called Christian domination. But as a result of that, not just the Jews, but bunches of people got oppressed and dominated as a result of the church. That is not all of what Christianity offered the world. But there's a history of that that is often unspoken to by Christians. When I get into relationship with Christians, often these days, people want to do interfaith discussions and let's all talk about how we're different and the same and we're Abrahamic faith and all that. Not many people want to go back with me to year 1000. They're not interested necessarily because they don't understand where it has implication because it's a history of domination, right? So from a place of Christian dominance, what are the stories Christians need to tell to be able to free up liberation for all the people whose dignity, whose lives, whose history were subjugated under the Christian church? I don't want you to sit around and start throwing a cat and nine tails over your back. What I do want you to do, though, is to take a real close look at history and do the way I love when my male allies or my white allies or my Christian allies, I have them too, right? So when we all gather together, they tell in first person the story of what it means to be reaching for liberation, both from the place where they are privileged and the places where they understand what it means to be targeted. So if you have those stories alive from your education or from your reading or from the ways in which you endeavor to be proximate to folks who have not been historically included by Christianity as a dominant religion, if you have those stories right here on your tips, it's better for us to walk together because sometime when I'm about to be oppressed or subjugated by an environment where Christian dominance is in place, I'm not going to be the one to have to stand up for myself. You're going to see the ball coming even before I do, and you're going to step right in front, and you're going to go, not today. I'm a Christian white male, and let me tell you why that's not going to work. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's about not only having knowledge, but also utilizing that knowledge to protect others and to
In your
share,
body,
right?
to live, that there's nothing about my body that makes me in a hierarchy or a position of dominance to any other human body in this universe. And in any ways in which I'm granted privilege and access with the assumption that that is true, I am willing to work to equalize power among us. So you gotta know a hell of a lot to be able to be ready to walk like that. And so to study and to get in relationships and to learn what you need to learn to be able to do that and hold a step. You just step right in front, whoop, not today, right? That's all I want from my allies. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.